Today we're going to talk a little bit about taking risks in life. And specifically, what's on my mind is that my life has been pretty good lately. I went through a divorce 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. And that was a negative thing and a positive thing all at the same time. It was negative in the sense that it felt like a big setback and it felt like losing something and it felt like uncertainty. But then it also felt like freedom, and it felt like an opportunity for me to take account for my own life without feeling like someone else might always be sort of manipulating or controlling what I do. In a lot of ways, it felt like a second chance to maybe go back to the drawing board and do things different and hopefully make the best of it, right? And now, 2 or 3 years down the road, a lot has changed in the sense that I've gotten my life a bit more in order. And then other things, in many ways, feel like they haven't changed very much. One day winds up just fading into the next, and the routines wind up feeling pretty similar, and sometimes life feels a bit stagnant. And all of that, it's stuff that I have to work through. But the reason I bring it up is because in life, sometimes you reach a point where you've been facing off with a lot of things that you've been challenged by. Personal demons and bad habits and different things that you've needed to work on. And then you reach a point where maybe life is okay. Life is peaceful. Life is good. I can do my job well. I don't worry about whether I'm going to be able to do a good job because I know how to do my job well. I don't worry about money. I'm compensated well. I have time to enjoy my hobbies, to work on writing a book or playing a game or making YouTube videos. Life is great in that way. So maybe sometimes I struggle to do some of the things that I have on the bucket list, but I don't have any barriers, nothing that's going to stop me from doing things that are important to me. There's so many good things I could say about life. And then there's also that thought of, well, I don't want to be alone forever, right? I don't want to be single at the end of my life, really. Preferably not. I was reading an article about how there's certain factors that can play a role in whether you live long or you don't. And some of those factors are obvious things like smoking and other bad habits, not exercising. But then they also found that loneliness, people who live alone, people who don't have connections in their life, well, those people wind up quite often not living as long, because it turns out that we are social creatures. We need connections. And even if you're doing just fine by yourself, we aren't really meant to be in an island off to ourselves. And so there's this sense of enjoying life, but also knowing that you're not supposed to be exactly where you are forever. You're supposed to move on. You're supposed to grow. And even if life is great for right now, it's not a season that's supposed to be forever. And with that knowledge comes the beginning of thinking, well, change is around the corner, and I don't know what that change is going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to meet somebody or when I'm going to meet them. And I don't know what necessarily my next career move is going to be. I don't necessarily know all of those things that are going to change my life around the corner and in the future. But I do have that feeling that life is going to change. And in a way, that's exciting, because I start to think, well, I guess I've grown to a point where I'm ready for certain changes in my life. But then there's also the fear, because there's that sense of, what if I lose my sense of freedom along the way? What if I go back to something that's painful or harmful, like certain things in the past? And so there's this desire to go and a desire to stay, and those things sort of are like a tug of war pulling at each other. And I guess what's on my mind is that if you're not careful, sometimes you can be so afraid that you're going to lose a part of yourself that you don't really venture out. You hang on to the safe space, which is great, and it's important for a time. But then at some point, maybe it's too much, and you need to embrace the idea that, yes, you've got to protect yourself, right? You've got to make sure you have healthy boundaries. You've got to make sure you don't walk into a situation that's manipulative or abusive or harmful or cruel in some way. But you also have to leave room in your life for new paths and new destinations to find you, because life is supposed to be about new things. It is supposed to be about change. It is supposed to be something that has fresh new experiences ahead. So it's important to be open to that. And maybe it's just exploring that new career opportunity. I'm not saying I'm gonna uproot myself necessarily and go walk off the job, but if there's something new I could be doing, to at least take a look, to be willing to have an open conversation. Now, does that mean it turns into a romantic relationship? Well, not necessarily. But every journey starts with a step, and sometimes you can become so burned, so jaded with life, so of a mind that the world's out to get you, so determined not to let the bad things of the past repeat, that you wind up going into a shell and never coming out again. And there are people who do sometimes experience something traumatic or painful, and they find a way to cope, and then they never stop just trying to cope. They never stop being in that limbo, not really moving forward, because everything feels like it's too big of a risk. So if you find yourself in that situation, give yourself time, give yourself space to heal, give yourself room to think. Give yourself assurance. Don't rush into things in a way that makes you extremely vulnerable to allowing the same problems that you have ran away from to return to you. But do leave yourself open to the possibility that something new can be around the corner. Do get up every day with a sense of optimism that you don't want the rest of your life to play out like Groundhog Day. At some point, you have to be willing to venture out, to open the door and take a step, and maybe allow a little bit of risk. Because if you don't risk something, you'll never gain anything meaningful. And there's certainly something to be said for the fact that some people live long lives in the sense that they're alive for a long time, but they maybe don't really live for a majority of their life, because most of their life is spent being afraid or being miserable in some way. And so instead of having a long, fruitful life, they have a long, uneventful one. And I know I don't want to be that person that's stuck on a feedback loop. So the more time goes on, the more I think to myself that while I do want to always make sure that I don't lose myself, I don't lose my autonomy, I don't lose my personal freedom, I don't forfeit my ability to do things that I enjoy, I think increasingly it's important to at least be open to see where the road might take me, and to not necessarily go into a shell and stay there forever. Change can be a frightening thing, but it's also frightening not to change. And I think we've all seen it when somebody is bitter and old and unhealthy, just sort of, existing, not really doing too bad necessarily, but also not really enjoying their life either. And we look at those people and we don't really want to be those people, because life should be lived every day with a sense of excitement. It should be celebrated every day. It should be a joyful thing. And if it's not, then we owe it to ourselves to allow our gardens to be planted with different seeds. I was talking to one of my coworkers about one of our managers, and so working for Walmart, we have store managers, and then we have store leads, which are the second in command. And I was talking about how this store manager had done a good job developing his store lead. So during his time as a manager, this other woman has done well, and she's promoted, and now she's second in command of that facility. And then I was thinking, it's not like he really did anything special, right? He didn't do anything extremely extraordinary to invest in this other employee's growth. But what he did do is foster an environment which was conducive to allowing that other person to grow, allowing that other person to find their legs, to learn how to be a better leader, to have faith in them, to step back and allow them to stand on their own 2 feet. You see, so sometimes when we think about transformation, when we think about doing new things, when we think about opening ourselves to new paths, it's important to realize that the goal shouldn't necessarily to be about going out and finding change. What it really is about is fostering an environment that is conducive to growth. You see, you don't go out when you're tending a garden, you don't go out and immediately force that garden to grow. You don't rush it to grow faster. But you do weed your garden. You do water it. And then when you eliminate the barriers to its growth, that small plant will naturally grow and flourish. So in our lives, it's the same way. When we want to create new things in our lives, it's not so much about going out and trying to force those new things into existence. Oftentimes, it's just about eliminating the barriers. It's about eliminating the things that prevent new growth from making its way into our lives and into our hearts. Maybe it's about opening yourself to the possibility of finding love. Or maybe it's finding it in yourself to change your mind about something like politics or religion or philosophy, ideologies that you've held for your whole life, to be willing to maybe change them up a little bit. Because sometimes we just need to stop wearing the same clothes every single day. You know, I was going through my closet, looking at my clothes, and I realized, you know, I've got a lot of clothing that's just, you know, starts to be a little bit worn out, and it's not something you can't wear anymore. It's just not new anymore either. And you realize some of this stuff, you've been wearing the same thing for a decade, probably. And you never just threw it out. And so I've thought, you know, like sometimes you gotta throw away the 10-year-old shirt and, you know, go invest in a few new things, you know. If you want your life to involve new people, new faces, new experiences, then at some point you've got to be willing to embrace new environments. You've got to venture out, because if you spend your life holed up in some dark cave that you've made for yourself, then you can't say it's anyone other than you that's done it to yourself when you wind up alone and bitter, wondering where your life went 30 years down the road. So take care of yourself, but don't be so determined to shut out darkness that you also forget to turn on the light. Life has loveliness to sell. Buy it and never count the cost. As always, wherever you find yourself on your adventure, best of luck to you. Till next time, and thanks so much for watching.